Welcome to Allegedly with Bo and Ryan, the only entertainment and law podcast that brings you the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. Allegedly.
I'm Bo Bowen.
And I'm Ryan Schmidt.
You're listening to Allegedly with Bo and Ryan. We're coming to you from our law offices in beautiful, historic Savannah, Georgia, where we'll be chatting about pop culture, hot legal topics in the news, and doing our best to change the way people think about the law and lawyers.
But first, a little about us. Bo is well known to be unbeatable in court. In fact, he is such a fierce competitor that he once won a staring contest with his own reflection.
And little known fact about Ryan, sharks have a week dedicated to him, and 2 more dedicated to his mustache.
Together, we are Savannah's consummate renegade legal titans.
And the only entertainment lawyers in the free world who have never lost a single case. Allegedly. Well, hey there, folks. Welcome back to Allegedly with Bo and Ryan. I'm Bo.
And I'm Ryan. We're your backstage passes to the fascinating world of entertainment law and here to help you navigate the twists, turns, and hopefully not get sued.
Well, that is the plan. And today, man, oh man, have we got a hot topic on our hands today. In fact, Ryan, this may well be the most important and talked about subject in the world right now. I'm talking about, of course, is it scientifically possible to look cool when you're running in flip-flops?
No, Bo, that's next week's episode.
My apologies. Right as always, Ryan. Now, today we want to discuss and break down the current actors strike between the Screen Actors Guild, or SAG-AFTRA, and the Alliance of Motion Pictures and Television Producers, or the AMPTP.
It's a big one, and to help us break down the strike, we have a very special guest. He's an actor, writer, director, and might I add, a proud member of SAG. We're thrilled to introduce our special guest today, the multifaceted Mark McCullough. A native of Savannah, Georgia, Mark ventured into politics and law after earning his degrees before a life-altering accident shifted his focus towards entertainment. You may have caught one of his compelling performances in films like Gravity, American Made, Arsenal, and Logan Lucky, as well as a television series such as The Walking Dead, Quantum Leap, and Cobra Kai. He is a consummate triple threat. Mark has also explored the other side of the camera, writing, acting, and directing in A Savannah Haunting, a film inspired by his own real-life supernatural experiences. When not on set, he shares his experience with aspiring actors with his acting program, the Working Actors Lab.
Well, we are talking about, of course, none other than the Mr. William Mark McCullough. Welcome to the show, Mark. How you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, guys. Thanks for having me on here. I'm super excited.
Absolutely. You know, Mark, I was thinking, I don't know if you remember this, but when you and I first met, we talked a little bit and realized we actually kind of had quite a few parallels in our lives. Do you remember that?
Mm-hmm.
I feel like you know. Well, let me tell you what I mean. Obviously, we both grew up in Georgia. We both graduated college from Mercer in Macon. Then we both went to law school in Washington, D.C. And then both ultimately ended up working in the entertainment industry here in the same town, Savannah, Georgia. We even worked together on some projects. And at one point, of course, we were even rocking the same mustache, Mark. Come on.
I'd say you rocked it much better than I did.
Finally, of course, after all those parallels, you end up being, this world famous actor known for his rugged good looks and being in world class shape, while I also ended up almost like that, but kind of exactly the opposite.
Just excited that, it finally came full circle. Bo represented our movie, A Savannah Haunting, when we were in production. And, it's such a difficult time making a movie, and the legal issues can be so complicated. And, Bo's help and guidance really saved the day. We would have been absolutely lost without that.
Well, I appreciate that, Mark. Of course, one of my favorite Mark stories, Ryan, is that for as well as I know Mark, and as long as I've known him, I was 100% convinced for 2 full seasons that he was playing a character named Olek on one of our favorite shows, Banshee.
Yeah, I remember that. It's one of our favorite shows. He's like, yeah, Mark's on that show.
You know the crazy thing about that? I got an interview last year from this reporter. My manager reached out to me, connected us, and the reporter contacted my manager after watching that show and thinking it was me. And so we're doing the interview, and he starts asking about that show. I was like, dude, I wasn't on that show.
Awesome.
I looked at that actor, and he does look a lot like me. Kind of crazy.
Oh, for sure. So for anybody that's listening that's not familiar with your work, you tell us about yourself, your background, and your career.
Sure. You know, like Bo had shared, you know, I went to school at Mercer, and like a lot of guys, I got out of college, was kind of lost and didn't know what to do. So I went to law school, and you know, I didn't really want to be a lawyer, but I didn't know what else to do. And when I was kind of at the very beginning, trying to figure out life, I'd taken a trip down to Nicaragua and got in a really bad car accident and spent about 5 weeks in the hospital, and it made me just reevaluate life. And I realized, you know, I'm doing something that I don't really like. It doesn't excite me. I'm not passionate about it. And I had buddies from law school who were super passionate about it. I'm like, well, this isn't for me. And I'd studied acting in college, but unfortunately, I didn't learn anything about how to get a job. So I graduated with just no idea. You know, I knew the craft of acting, but not how to turn that into a paycheck to pay my rent. But anyway, after I had the car accident, I just packed up, moved to LA. I didn't know anybody, didn't know anyone, and I also didn't know anything that I needed to know. And I started what I lovingly refer to as my ramen noodle years. Just blindly flailed around in LA, like trying to figure things out. I had no money, no connections. And, I loved it. I was working on a lot of like short films and student films and low budget films I hope no one ever sees. But I learned a lot. And eventually I kind of figured out how this business works and was fortunate enough to be able to actually start making a paycheck doing it. And I've been very fortunate to make my living as an actor for almost 10 years now. But it was only after a very long time of being very stupid and making every mistake literally that any actor can possibly make. Yeah. When I have free time, I like to coach, teach actors a little bit. And really, there's nothing special about what I teach. I just kind of guide them into not doing the really stupid things that I did when I started out.
Kind of the goal of our podcast.
Exactly.
Well, that does segue well, Mark. You talk about making your living as an actor and how difficult that can be into our actual, topic today. And the reason we wanted to have you on. How long have you been a member of the Screen Actors Guild, Mark?
I joined in 2007.
Okay. Now, for anyone, that for whatever reason has not heard yet, but that may be confused as to how we got here, what led to the strike, how would you boil it down, Mark? I mean, what are the root causes of the current actor strike?
I think there's a couple of issues. I mean, I think for one, there's a lot of angst. I think the writers kind of got it started, when they were discussing their issues, because many of their issues are in ways shared with the actors. And, I know for me personally, I've seen a huge impact on my income due to streaming models. And I'm sure we'll get into details on this later, but I think it was the streaming platforms have really blown up, and the contracts were not, they weren't created in a way to reflect working in the streaming world. And when the contracts were first created dealing with streaming, it was a very, very tiny percentage of our workload. Most of our work was network TV or cable or film. And now streaming just amounts for just a huge portion. And because of the fact that residuals and your pay overall with streaming is just, it is a tiny, tiny percentage of what it would be on those other methods of showing films and TV shows. It's made it more difficult to make your living as an actor. And I think that there was a lot of just angst about that. And then there's a lot of other issues that have been kind of boiling in the background. And to be honest, I think by the writers having the guts to go on strike, it really gave the actors kind of the impetus to say, you know what, we can do this too.
Well, yeah. I mean, when you think about streaming, part of you thinks, well, streaming's been around a long time. I mean, shouldn't they have addressed this in previous iterations of this contract, but you think back to when the last one was negotiated, that was right before COVID, and COVID really did make a huge difference on streaming and the popularity of streaming and the prevalence of it. And I mean, it's a whole different world now than it was 3 years ago.
Oh yeah, absolutely. I mean, I'd say now 90% of my jobs in the last couple of years have been on streaming versus, regular network.
Well, can you kind of break that down a little more specifically? Like, what is it about, like, what is the difference if you have a role that's on television, like network television, or a movie versus streaming? How does that impact you personally?
Sure. So for TV, you work on, let's say, a CBS show. You work on that show. You get paid for your time for working that week or weeks, however long you're working there. But that's not really where you make the majority of your income for the year. Where you make your money is every time that episode airs again, you get paid again. And each time it airs, you get less than you did the first time. But but the idea is you're working on multiple shows, they're playing multiple times, and you're getting repaid each time that happens. So it kind of creates this wave of income. Year one, you work on 5 TV shows, you get paid up front. Year 2, they start playing a rerun, so you're getting those 5 shows payment of residuals, plus assuming you're working on additional shows, you get paid for that. Year 3, you're getting residuals from prior 2 years, plus the third year. It kind of grows, and so your career is able to grow and your income's able to grow. With streaming, that's not the case because there are no reruns of streaming, right? And the streamers won't release their viewership. So when Netflix says, "Oh, we've got a show that's out that's number 1 on our platform," that means nothing because we have no idea how many people are actually watching that show. And there's basically, when you work on a streaming show, you're going to get paid upfront for the weeks or days that you work on the show. And then the residuals are going to be almost non-existent. With film, with non-streaming film, actors participate in the profit of the film. So if you work on a film that is hugely successful, the actors get a percentage of that success as long as the movie makes money. Now, if you work on a film that bombs the box office, you don't get any residuals. Well, if you work on a film on streaming, again, it's the same issue. There's no release of numbers, so you have no idea how well it did. So to give an example, I've got a friend and I were just talking about this the other day. He worked on a regular, out in theater movie with a huge director and big star. And over a 3-year period, he made about $150,000 in residuals on that film. He worked on a similar sized movie for Netflix, big star, big director. And then 3 years after that movie came out, he made $500 in residuals. That's how.
Wow. So yeah, it seems like those numbers that the streamers are keeping from everybody really impacts the ability to come up with even a calculation, a way to calculate how those residuals are paid out.
Exactly, because the way it works, these streaming services, they have this huge library, and lots of those shows aren't very successful, but they're just there just in case. But some of the shows obviously are the ones that draw audiences to those platforms. And yeah, when you work on them, like if 1 million people watch them or 1,000 people watch them, it's not reflected in the actors' residuals at all.
So you've mentioned the changes in the industry, inflation, of course, is an issue, different things that are changing that affect the actor's bottom line. Some people online, I've seen different comments. I'm sure you've seen this too. What would you say to people who think that this strike is nothing more than a bunch of millionaire celebrity actors crying poverty?
Well, I mean, realistically, the number of millionaire actors is so small. It's like, I'm sure a lot of people have seen the numbers kind of floating around online, but 13% of SAG members earn enough money every year to be eligible for health insurance. And that amount is about $26,000. So that means that 87% of SAG members make less than $26,000 a year. The top 1% of SAG actors make $100,000 or more. And obviously, when you start getting to the Tom Cruises and Brad Pitts of the world, that is 0.00001% of SAG actors. And to be quite honest, it's irrelevant to Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt what SAG does or doesn't do because they're not they're not being paid based on a SAG contract. They're being paid because they're superstars. The issues at hand really are more addressed towards primarily what I refer to as the blue collar working class actor, which is what I am. The kind of actor who, except for maybe your mama and your dad and your best friends, they don't know your name if they see you at the grocery store. They might go, "You look like a guy I saw on a TV show tonight." They don't know who you are, right?
Oh, you're that guy.
Yeah, you're the guy. It's funny for me, all the time, the gym at the grocery store, people will come up and say, "Man, I saw a movie last night. You look just like that actor." And usually it's me, but unlike Bo's story where he watched 2 seasons of God's Not Me. But the Tom, and again, I love Tom Cruise. I mean, whatever, but the Tom Cruises of the world, SAG is, I wouldn't say irrelevant, but it has much less impact on their day-to-day existence than the blue collar working actors. So it is certainly not about those guys. It is really about those folks who either make their living as an actor and they're trying to pay their bills, take care of their family, do whatever, or those people who have aspirations to do that.
Well, speaking of Tom Cruise, we were just talking the other day about the fact that the new Mission Impossible movie's out, and it's so funny. Like, I love those movies. They're basically the movie equivalent of Tom Cruise himself, just that manic energy, know. But you've worked on a movie with Tom Cruise, right? Did you get to know him well in that experience?
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say know him well. I mean, we weren't like hanging out having drinks together, but I did spend about 2 months with him, and I spent a lot of those 2 months sitting in the cockpit of an airplane, just me and him. And I tell everyone who will listen that I have nothing but respect for Tom Cruise. I mean, he is the hardest working dude I've ever met in the business. And that hard work comes from a place of, let's all make a great movie. I saw him repeatedly be kind and thoughtful and considerate of folks that many times are not considered. People like craft services PAs and extras, and folks, it's easy to kind of like overlook them if you're kind of a jackass. And Tom Cruise purposely, I saw him over and over, go out of his way to acknowledge those people, acknowledge their hard work, and give them some positive feedback. It's interesting. We were down in South America, and the last Mission Impossible had just come out, and I had not seen it yet. And I just knew he was going to ask me if I'd seen the movie. And I was like dreading that question, right? So I'm sitting there on the plane, and like we're getting ready to do the scene. He looks over and goes, "So you see the new movie?" And I was like, "Oh, not yet, Tom." I was like, what you don't want to do is tell Tom Cruise to his face you haven't seen his new Mission Impossible movie. But yeah, he was, it's kind of fun for people in cocktail parties in Hollywood to make fun of Tom Cruise or whatever. And he certainly doesn't need me defending him. But when I hear that at a party, I always go to his defense because I saw him be nothing but a professional, hardworking guy who loves filmmaking and just pushes everyone to do the best job they can. But he pushes them from a place of love.
I mean, that's really good to hear. I mean, because he's so mercurial. Is that the word?
Yeah.
Sure. It's like it's just so hard to get a read on because he can be so like odd sometimes when you see him and like when he's giving interviews. So it is good to know that he's is a good guy. And he does
here's the
care
thing
about
too.
the people.
He's been a superstar since 1982. You know what I mean? Like Tom Cruise walks in a room, and this happened. It happened multiple times where a bunch of people on set. No one's looking at the door. Tom Cruise walks in the room, and he walks in the room. He carries an energy with him that regular folks just don't have. But if you look at his contemporaries from the 80s, who kind of got in the business the same time as him, and they were kind of movie stars of the era, look at their careers now versus his career now. He's still doing massive, huge films. He's still a superstar. Many of those other guys are not. And I think the reason for that is people love working with Tom Cruise. And you can be a jerk for a little while, but eventually folks will go, you know what, life's too short. And I think the reason he works all the time and does these massively successful films is because the people who are working for him, now he's going to push you like a good coach would push you if you're a football player or something. But it's coming from a place of, let's all make a great movie. And it's not coming from a place of ego or self-centeredness.
Right. Well, that's great. Well, thinking back to what we were talking about a moment ago about some of the issues with the strike and with streaming and how they don't release these numbers. But I mean, I guess the real question is why? Because they have the numbers. I mean, no one if they say, we don't have any way of tracking that. Well, that's obviously bullshit. I mean, how is Netflix having their top 10 every day
Exactly.
on the site? So how are they getting away with not releasing these numbers?
To be honest, Bo, I have no idea. I've been asking this for years because for as long as network televisions have been around, the Nielsen ratings have been a part of that, right? It is part of the system. And why the streamers don't release this information, I don't know. It would certainly be the fairest way to allocate residuals based on how well the shows are doing. If they're getting watched a lot, they can share in the success of that show. And if it's a show that's not getting watched as much, they don't have to pay out as much. But I don't see the upside to that. I don't know why they're hiding those numbers unless they're not doing as well as, they want people to think. But I don't know.
But even if so, I mean, you would think that the ability to resolve these issues would be so easy if they just were straightforward with it. And so I guess, going back to that.
For them now, why would they? I mean, they got it great right now. For them, before the strike, there was not an issue to resolve. If they're paying $500 in residuals, where another similarly funded film is paying $150,000 in residuals, that's pretty good for them.
Right. Well, and I think that's that's the primary issue on that, at least that side, because you have seen these profits for these streamers just skyrocketing while, the payments being made to the actors, the writers, and everyone else is just plummeting.
Well, yeah, I don't know. I mean, I was talking to a guy at a huge studio a couple weeks ago, and this was right before the SAG actors won't strike, and he was saying that the huge studio that he works at, which does have a streaming platform connected to it, he predicts that it's going to go under in the next 6 months to a year. And his take on it was that a lot of these streamers are on very shaky ground because there's been such a huge growth in streaming. There's only so many eyeballs.
Right.
But now there's many, many more streaming platforms. And so there was a point where Netflix was just throwing money at filmmakers because they were the only game in town. And I saw something earlier this week that last year there was, I think, 599 episodes of I'll use the word TV, but obviously streaming, whatever, but 599 episodic shows created, whereas 5 years ago, it was fewer than 200. So that's been a massive increase in the number of shows that are watched. So I think some people are predicting that what's going to fall out of this is that a lot of these streaming services are going to go under, and it's kind of going to consolidate so that there's fewer shows being made, but they have more eyeballs on them, therefore more revenue on them.
Yeah, I would think consolidation is going to be inevitable. I mean, but you're already starting to see it. I mean, what was it, just 2-3 weeks ago that Paramount Plus took over Showtime, and I mean, I think you're just going to continue
Max and Discovery Plus and all that,
right? And HBO, one of the most known brands in the universe. Let's go with Max.
Exactly
what that was all about, but at any rate, well, I think so that's pretty easy to get your head around. The fact that we've got to address the streaming services in a way that's fair and gets people that are the creatives and put all the work and the effort in, get them compensated fairly. But let's talk a little bit about the other main issue, because to me, it's a little more, it doesn't make just, the dollars and cents part of it, but it's by far the scarier part. And that's the use of AI. And that's particularly when you talk about generating actors' likenesses. I mean, that's one of the main points of this conflict, I understand.
Yes.
Ryan and I had an episode recently where we talked about where AI could potentially be headed. It was some pretty scary shit. So you're obviously deeply involved in the industry. What are your thoughts on that?
Well, I have a lot of thoughts on that. I wrapped recently on a big budget, $250 million film. And at the end of every day, they would take me into this, it was a trailer basically that you'd step into a like a globe of cameras that would take pictures all over your body, right? So they literally had a 3D version of you that they can use to, if there's an issue on your scene that you shot, they can fix it without bringing you back, without having to reshoot. So they have the capabilities now to replace actors. It's probably not going to be perfect just yet, but they can do really good work with it now. And it's terrifying. I mean, for me, it's much bigger than just the entertainment industry. I mean, I think there's a lot of people who are in danger. Now, my thing is like, yes, we should certainly fight as actors and writers to prevent the networks or the studios and networks, I guess, from using AI. But to be honest, I think it's got to be a bigger fight. I think the only way to truly protect those creatives is through national legislation, because the contracts will, if we're able to work out contracts with the studios to limit the use of AI, that's only going to limit those studios who are in a union contract. Anyone can start a company tomorrow making movies using AI. If they're not a part of those union contracts, they can do whatever they want to. The way to stop those corporations from doing it is to enact some type of legislation to put a limit on it.
No, you're absolutely right. Like, Zuckerberg just steps up tomorrow and says, "Welcome to AI Studios."
Exactly. Yeah. And if that organization is not part of the union contract, boom, he can, and we all seen it. I mean, who would have guessed in 2005 that Netflix was going to destroy Blockbuster, right? This little upstart destroy Blockbuster. And all it would take is a well-funded AI studio, not limited in any way, to overthrow the studios in a matter of years if they're able to produce AI content.
It's true. I just saw on the new Disney Plus series Secret Invasion, even the intro where the music's playing, that was 100% generated by AI. So now you think about the animators who otherwise would have been hired to do that. It's just, it's a cost saving tool, it seems like, at that point.
Sure.
I mean, and you're right about it ranging far beyond just the entertainment industry, because I mean, you think about even the legal industry and people coming into court with video evidence proving someone committed this crime, and meanwhile they were 600 miles away.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, well,
yeah, it's got some major consequences that I mean, I'm hoping that lawmakers take very seriously and start addressing.
Yeah, I mean, it seems like the challenge there from some of the discussions on Capitol Hill is, where is this technology currently at and where is it going, so we can address these problems. I mean, obviously the copyright laws need to be updated. We haven't got real reform since 1976. But also, a lot of these problems seem to be revolved around like the right to publicity and people's likeness. So, I mean, right now that kind of protects, famous, well-known public figures, but this stuff can rip off anybody. So it seems like that's another area that needs to be legislated around.
Sure. And then also, like, if, one of the things they're talking about is using just thousands and thousands of various actors' images and background people's images to create unique individuals on the screen that aren't a particular person. I'm sure they're not far off from that. And basically when that happens, I mean, yeah, if you're famous, you can probably work out some kind of deal with the studios so they use your likeness and you get paid a lot of money because people want to see Tom Cruise in a movie, even if it's AI Tom Cruise. Nobody's paying money to see William Mark McCullough in a movie. You know what I mean? Like the AI William Mark McCullough, no one cares about. So yeah, it's scary. It's really scary.
I was seeing when SAG was talking about the breakdown in negotiations, they were talking about one of the proposals that the AMPTP was proposing that they said was groundbreaking, was that they wanted the ability to scan background actors, pay them for half a day's work, and then use that likeness in perpetuity without any permission or additional pay. My thought with that is, how often is it that background actors eventually kind of elevate to those starring roles? So what happens in that situation? You're like, hey, kid, you already gave me your rights 10 years ago, so I'm not going to pay you.
Sure.
I've been negotiating contracts and contracts with actors on behalf of productions and vice versa for a long time. And, for many years, you'd have a little phrase in an agreement that says, okay, we have the right to, if necessary, to simulate your performance. And the intent was always, if we had to change a line or whatever, like you said, you don't have to bring them back from one little thing. But if a studio starts relying upon that one word, we can simulate you. And that means they can do anything they want. And they have now the ability to do anything they want. I mean, that's truly terrifying.
When I was told on set that, hey, come over here, we're going to capture your image. I was like, whoa. So I immediately reached out to my agent to ask about it. I was like, this does not sound good to me. And, I was assured that under the current contracts, they can't use our likeness to do new scenes. You can't do additional scenes, but they can do it to like I said, fix things. So yeah, I mean, there's so many things around AI that I think while each of us in our own particular line of work has to be focused on how it affects us and how to protect ourselves as much as possible, I think we also have to look at it holistically as a country about how do we want to see ourselves as a people in relationship to this new technology that, to be honest, who the hell knows what's going to happen?
Well,
you know what I mean?
Of course.
AI scares me on a broad scale. I know there's promises of possible really good outcomes, but there's some really dark downsides that are out there as well.
But that's the whole thing. It's almost impossible to foresee. I mean, we were talking the other day. It's like, you go back to seeing Pong on a television for the first time, and then looking at that and saying, okay, this is where the video game industry is going to be 25 years from now.
Right.
Absolutely impossible. No one could have ever dreamed the light year leaps that would have occurred, in a very short period of time. So,
well, Bill Gates wrote a book in 1995 about the future technology and doesn't mention the internet. You know what I mean? Like, who knows what's gonna happen? Yeah, it's crazy.
Well, let just so we have this clear in terms of who is actually striking now. There's a lot of people that fall under the umbrella of SAG-AFTRA.
Yes.
So can you kind of give an explanation of what it is as an organization and who all it represents total, and then who in particular is affected by this strike?
Sure. Well, it was originally SAG, which was the Screen Actors Guild, and it handled folks who acted in things that were shot on film. And AFTRA handled people who worked on video and radio. So it would be like soap opera actors and folks working in radio. SAG was movie and TV when it was shot on film. Obviously, almost everything now is digital, so that became a silly distinction, so they combined. Hope I don't leave anyone out. So obviously, SAG represents actors. They represent background actors. They represent stunt performers. They represent voiceover artists. I think like host, people who like kind of talking to look at what is it called? The teleprompter, those folks. And I'm sure there's some other people that I don't even know about, but that's the big group. Right now, the strike is specifically against films and TV shows that are being made by studios, networks, or streaming services that are part of the AMPT, whatever that description is. It doesn't affect commercials. It doesn't affect video games, and it doesn't affect independent films not attached to those big entities that they're striking against. If those independent films get a waiver from SAG, it also doesn't affect non-union projects. Obviously, there's lots of movies that are made non-union that have non-union crew, non-union actors. So those are the kind of the big categories, I think. Hopefully I didn't miss it.
Well, let's talk about that. That's really great that you said what doesn't apply to the strike. Well, what about what actors can't do right now? And how does that affect your day-to-day life right now?
Well, the biggest is I can't work on TV and film. It's interesting. I actually got a commercial. Like I normally, for whatever reason, no one wants to use my face to promote their product. So I've never made a dime from a commercial. And I actually got a commercial audition yesterday. I thought it was kind of funny because I don't get those. But I got a commercial audition and a video game audition, where basically they do the body capture, because those are allowed. But it affects me, number one, with work. That's the biggest effect. The other thing is promotion. You know, a big part of being an actor is marketing your product. And, I really preach that to actors a lot. Well, we're not allowed to go on social media and promote any project that we were working on that's coming out. We're not allowed to go to film festivals to do podcasts specifically about a TV show or film we have coming out. So for me, like I'm in a TV show that came out yesterday that right now is #1 on Netflix, but I can't like post about it or whatever, even though I'm not. Who cares? No one's running to Netflix for my posts. It's, it's about my marketing stuff. I've got a big TV show coming out next month that's being struck. So I can't talk about it. So for me, it's the marketing. I can't do any articles about any of the projects I have coming out while the strike's going on, and I can't work. And that affects a lot of actors in a lot of ways. I mean, we have to make, like I said, the minimum to keep your health insurance every year. For me personally, the whole year's been rough because generally speaking, pilot season starts right after the end of Sundance, end of January every year. And there's a big, huge burst in auditions from the end of January through about the end of May. And I normally get, on average, 8 to 10 auditions a week. This past year, between end of January and the May, I got 1 audition per week. And it was because so many productions were afraid that the WGA and SAG would strike, so they didn't go into production. They didn't want to start production and get shut down halfway through. So there was a dramatic decrease in the amount of work this year. And then obviously when the strikes started, it basically shut down 99% of the work. So it's been very impactful.
Right. And I would think that when you talked about, the residuals and profit sharing and things like that, even if something's already complete and in the can, they may not want to even release it now because the actors can't go out and promote it.
Right.
So,
absolutely.
That's tough.
Absolutely.
So, but I know you did mention there are a few things you still are allowed to do. Like I know Bride Hard is a good example here locally. It was granted an interim agreement. Some people call a waiver with SAG to start back up production because it is a truly independent film, not affiliated with any AMPTP entity in any way. Right. And so in those circumstances, they can apply for that interim agreement and continue to operate, correct?
That's correct. There's still a few questions out there that I'm looking for answers to as a filmmaker, because, as an independent filmmaker, I'm not associated with any of the studios. But what I don't know is if you get one of those interim agreements, are you allowed to eventually sell your project to someone who's being struck right now?
I can answer that for you. The answer is absolutely not.
Okay, so
you are not.
That's
you can,
the case.
You can once the strike is concluded, but not during the strike. Absolutely.
Okay, but yeah, once the strike's over, you can sell it to whomever. Okay,
absolutely, 100%. You just have to, in order to qualify, you have to, if you've sold one single right to anyone even remotely affiliated with an AMPTP, you're not going to get that interim agreement. So,
gotcha.
but once it's over, and essentially what you're doing with that interim agreement is saying, we agree that we will honor whatever the ultimate terms are that are negotiated when the strike is over. That's what you're having to say. But
Tebow, this is why you're such a great entertainment lawyer. You help us all the time. It's fantastic.
You're welcome.
Can't wait to share this information.
But I had a question for you about that, though, that I was kind of curious with these interim agreements and waivers. Even if a production is granted an interim agreement, is there a possibility that some actors may not feel comfortable working on a set and acting just because of the optics of it? And it may look like they are not honoring the strike. I mean,
absolutely.
I mean, how do you feel about that?
Well, I don't have an issue with it because, if SAG is cool with it, I'm cool with it, right? You got to pay your bills. But I get it. I mean, I remember a few years ago, I was working in a foreign country where the production was shooting, and they brought like a handful of American actors to shoot there, and that was mostly locals. And it happened to be on Labor Day. It was one of the shoot days. And one of my actor buddies who's working, he's like, I'm not working Labor Day. And they, the production's like, well, we'll double the pay, we'll triple the pay. He's like, I'm not doing it. I was like, okay, I get it. So I respect what anyone wants to do. I certainly get folks going, I feel better not working at all during the strike. But I also totally understand when people say, hey, I've got an electric bill to pay and I got to feed my kids. I got to work, and if SAG is giving the waiver or the interim agreement, then they're saying it's okay. So it's okay with me. So, but will there be fewer actors willing to work? Absolutely. I guarantee there's fewer actors who they just don't want to they don't want to mistakenly be thought that they're crossing a picket line.
Oh, that makes sense. And of course, the writers are also on strike. We did a whole show about the writers' strike a couple months back, and it looks like this is actually the first time since 1960 that both SAG and the WGA were on strike at the same time. Do you believe that solidarity between the unions is ultimately going to help in those negotiations? Absolutely.
I mean, basically, except for these exceptions to the general rule, nothing's going to be made. With the writers on strike, there's plenty of scripts floating around that could potentially be made. But with the actors joining with the writers, what are you going to do? You can't make stuff without the writers and without a script. So I think it certainly puts a lot more pressure on the folks to come to the bargaining table.
You're right. You have to believe, because you're talking about 11,000 members of the WGA versus 160,000 of SAG. You have to believe the WGA was like, come on, please strike. Let's do this. But, thinking a little bit in the future. Now, I remember talking to you back during COVID and, of course, everything shut down overnight and you were particularly impacted by that. In fact, you want to talk a little bit about that?
Sure.
You dealt with?
Yeah. So we were scheduled to start filming a Savannah haunting on March 23rd, 2020. We had scheduled the film, budgeted the film for that start date, and we got shut down 2 days before we were going to start because of COVID. And we didn't start back up until August. And we were shooting primarily at my house. So I had my entire driveway was filled with a semi truck filled with film equipment. We had built fake sets in my house that I couldn't get from the back of the house to the front of the house, without walking outside and walking around. It was kind of crazy. So it definitely impacted us. Now, once things started happening again, you did have this 6-month period where nothing was being made. So when the floodgates opened, there was certainly a pretty big uptick in the amount of work that was happening. I think the same thing's going to happen now. Like the longer these strikes go, when they finally negotiate a contract, and they will obviously at some point, I think there's going to be a huge explosion of work. So I think it can be, it's rough right now, but I think it can be very positive for SAG actors, especially those SAG actors who don't have a lot of credits. Those actors who are just kind of starting out, getting their feet wet, because the more experienced actors with bigger resumes, they can still only work on one film or TV show at a time. And so if you have a bunch of stuff shooting at the same time, those people who are high in demand will get sucked up very quickly. Well, there's still roles that have to be filled. And I think this will be a great opportunity for newer actors or less experienced actors to jump in there and get work that they normally, it may be a little tougher for them to get. So I think for those folks, it's going to be overall a pretty good positive for them.
Well, I think you may be forgetting AI William Mark McCullough, now starring in 100 things simultaneously.
Oh, there's that.
Sure. but Ryan and I recently reviewed a printout of the current negotiation status. I think it was from last week. And to say the least, Mark, it was not encouraging. There were definitely a few areas of agreement, but there were a hell of a lot of SAG-AFTRA demands that just said rejected. Rejected. Have you seen that document?
Oh, yes. I read that document. It is disheartening.
Yeah, for sure. And I think one area I was really surprised to see such kind of vociferous pushback was on the timing of payments to actors for services rendered. I mean, SAG is requesting additional penalties if actors aren't paid for their work in a timely manner. And the AMPTP say, oh, no, that's not necessary. We're not going to do that. But have you ever personally run into that issue?
Let me tread lightly. Yes. I worked on one of the biggest TV franchises in the world. I won't say when, and I didn't get paid. And my agent kept reaching out. And I just didn't get paid. And eventually I reached out to SAG to say, hey, I haven't been paid. And it had been 6 months. And they're like, well, after 6 months, they're not obligated to pay you. Like, what?
Holy Lord.
These people's coffee budget for the day is more than my entire paycheck for the shows. But I think it kind of fell through the cracks. Yeah, that certainly happens. I would say that's not something for me personally. That was certainly an outlier. I'm usually paid pretty timely. The project that I just worked on, there was a little snafu with the timing of payment, but we got it worked out pretty easily. For me personally, I can tell you there's some other issues that I think are very impactful, especially on those actors in the Southeast. One of the biggest is what's being referred to as geographic discrimination. And I have seen this dozens and dozens and dozens of times in my own career, where I'll get an audition for a show that's shooting in Atlanta, and I get an audition from my Atlanta agent for a role. I'll get an audition out of LA, my LA agent, for the exact same role. Out of LA, the role is called a guest star, paying, I think the rate now is like $10,800 an episode. Out of Atlanta, same role is called a co-star, paying $4,000 an episode. Wow. That is dramatically different. And classically, those terminologies, guest star, co-star, series regular, are based on the content of the character. So for instance, on a TV show, if you're a co-star, what that usually meant was you're a character that gives life to the scene, but your character's not a part of the story. So let's say two of them series regulars are at a diner talking about whatever the case they're working on. The waiter who comes up and asks if they want a coffee will be a co-star. His line, would you like another coffee? It doesn't move the story forward. It makes us as the audience go, oh, this is a real world they're in, right? So the co-stars kind of populate the world. The guest star would be a character that's in the story that's not in all the episodes. It may only be in one episode, but their character is an integral part of the story. So let's say on Law and Order, a guest star would be the character who's accused of murder that week. So their character is absolutely integral to the story. And that was kind of the classic breakdown. Well, that's just thrown out the window now, because I've worked on big TV shows where my character was the focus of multiple episodes, and it was called a co-star because I booked it out of Atlanta. I've worked on shows in LA where I'm in one scene in the show for 2 minutes and got guest star casting because that character was super important. It has nothing to do with how many scenes you're in, how many lines. It's really if the character is integral to the story or not. And so for someone who's a working actor in the Southeast, that is a pretty dramatic impact, on your upfront pay, but your residuals are based on what your upfront pay is. So if you're making less upfront, you're going to make less in residuals. That's a big one. Another big one for me in the Southeast is, and this has happened so many times, you book a show and you're told you're going to be shooting from, let's say I booked the show March 5th, and they say, okay, Mark, you're going to be working from April 1st to May 1st. And then a week before filming starts, they send me an email saying, oh, we backed it up 3 weeks. Still working for a month, but it's going to be starting 3 weeks later. And almost the date starts, it gets backed up a month. This happened to me 2 years ago. I booked a show in March, told it was going to start in April. I didn't walk onto set until September 1st. So that entire time I'm booking out, which means my agent is not getting me auditions for other shows because they're presumably going to work at the same time. But my actual work time got pushed back further and further and further and further. So I basically went months not doing a whole lot of work because I'm on hold for this other show, but I didn't get paid a dime for that hold. That needs to be addressed. If you're going to put someone on hold and move them repeatedly, the actor should be compensated for that. And that was something that was rejected. The geographic discrimination was rejected. So those for folks who are in the Southeast, those two things I think are really, really important.
And that's all part of the current negotiation. Then.
Yes, because they were just flat out rejected by the producer.
Well, I have to say, do you know, are they even meeting right now? Are the two sides even talking?
I don't think so.
You know,
I mean, they may be doing it off the record, behind, back channels, but I don't think they're doing it for the public to know about.
I mean, it's certainly there's no indication that there's an immediate end in sight. I mean, for certain. I mean, but I mean, I have to believe. I mean, would you agree that kind of the general consensus, we're really at extremely important crossroads here, and there's really no choice but to kind of buckle in and address these issues now, no matter what it takes.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think both sides are pretty entrenched. I've heard talk. I don't know if it's legitimate or not, but I'm sure you've all heard the same thing, that the producers' strategy is to just hold out until the writers and actors run out of money. So I don't know if that's true or not, but if that's the case, that they're taking a long-term approach to trying to get their way. I mean, I get it. If you're a studio and you can use AI and not have to pay actors and not to pay writers and not have a crew, not to do, I mean, yeah, I mean, I get totally why they want to not give that up. That makes sense from a financial perspective, but by doing that, they basically completely decimate the workers in the entertainment world. I mean, it seems like these other things they just seem common sense based, that should be pretty easy to reach. And things like, hey, if you're gonna work on a streaming show, it should pay you as an actor about the same as if you worked on a network show. Like I don't know why that's even a hard issue to hammer out. Or hey, if you're gonna call this role a guest star out of LA, it should also be a guest star in Atlanta or New Orleans or Chicago. Like that just seems like so fair and straightforward. I don't know why they're having a hard time coming to terms with that. The AI, I think, is a much bigger deal. I mean, that's going to be something that I'm very curious how that's going to work out.
Well, two other little questions I want to ask you, then I will let you go, Mark. I really appreciate your time today.
No,
one, we're already seeing certainly the impacts of the strike on content. I mean, even with the writer's strike, obviously the talk shows shut down. We saw where the cast of Oppenheimer got up and walked out as soon as the strike. So can you kind of walk through just a little bit about, what are the actual practical impacts the strike is going to make on content and on the consumers who want to watch new content in the future?
Well, I mean, the longer the strike goes, the less stuff is going to be available, less new stuff. I mean, you can, obviously independent films will be made, but there's no such thing as an independent TV show. Any TV show is going to be made in association with some type of streaming service or network. So if this thing goes a long time, and what I'm hearing from a lot of people is that it is likely to go a long time, I think it's going to be pretty impactful on content. Certainly those folks who have their favorite shows, they can expect to wait a long time to see the next season.
Well, that brings me to my last question for you, Mark. Now I'm going to ask you to play a role. Okay. And this is, we are not AMPTP here. So, but I want you to be Nostradamus. Okay.
Okay.
So what is your best prediction on where this is going and how long you believe it's likely going to take?
I think it's going to take 6 to 9 months to come to a conclusion. I think it's going to go long. My guess is the streamer's going to come up with some type of payment schedule. Like if they don't want to release their viewership numbers, my guess is what they're going to do is say, okay, on your network TV show, someone works as a guest star on one episode. What is the average residuals an actor makes over a 5-year period on something like that? And then they can just pay that amount or something along those amount up front, so they don't have to release their numbers. I think that's something that could be worked out. I think most of these things can be worked out. I think it'll probably, they'll give and take here and there. I just have no idea with the AI. I mean, They're probably, if the past is any predictor, the future will be some type of Band-Aid that's put on it. I hope not, but I'm terrible at predicting things. So don't take my thoughts on this at all.
I mean, we all are, right?
Yeah. If I were betting money, I would bet 6 to 9 months we'll be on strike. And I do think that the actors and the writers will get most of what they want. Because at the end of the day, I mean, the studios and the networks, I mean, hell, you have to have content. And if you don't have content, you will collapse. So I think they're going to have to make these, at least a lot of concessions or move further towards the actors and writers than they've done so far. But like I said, for me, the big outlier that I just have no idea about is AI.
No, that makes sense. I mean, Mark, thank you so much. I mean, you've really helped us provide a clearer picture of what's going on with this strike. And before we let you go, to the extent you can, fill us in on what you got going on professionally right now.
Sure. I don't think I'm prevented from having a conversation on a legal-based podcast.
Nice.
So as long as it's not about, right now I got I'm on this season's Sweet Magnolias, which is #1 right now on Netflix. Next month I'm on Apple TV show Manhunt, which was the most expensive show made last year. I think it was $162 million for 7 episodes. Shot in Savannah, which is cool. I don't get to work at home a lot. Interesting thing, when I first moved to Southeast, the very first role I ever booked was John Wilkes Booth, man who killed Lincoln in a low-budget movie. And in this TV show, I play the man who hunts down and kills John Wilkes Booth. So that was kind of a fun thing. And then I got another movie that was shot in Savannah called An LA Minute, hitting video on demand on the 28th, I believe. So I got a few things coming up that'll be fun. Yeah.
Yeah, that's awesome. Well, if to the extent some of our listeners want to learn more about you, where can they find you online? What's the best resource?
Probably Instagram. If you go to, I think it's Mark McCullough. I'm pretty easy to find on Instagram. And if you're an actor who's looking for like classes, and I post little videos about just giving tips on acting. I have an Instagram page called Working Actor Lab, also on YouTube, Working Actor Lab. Now with my free time, I'm able to make more videos and just, again, I just offer advice on the stupid shit that I did when I started. Just like, hey, don't do all the stupid stuff that I did. So,
well, we really appreciate your time, Mark, and Bo and I certainly stand with you and your fellow actors during the strike.
Yeah, absolutely. So stay strong, my friend.
Thanks, guys. It was really great chatting with both of you, and appreciate it, and I love what you guys are doing.
Thanks, and we will talk to you soon, man.
All right, buddy.
Mark is the best, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, this strike is a really big deal. I mean, it's impacting everybody in the industry. I mean, including us. I mean, and even like caterers and hotels, and I mean, there's so many. Have you heard anything about this? I know it's been mentioned a few times at the Film Alliance meetings about Breeze flying to Savannah from LA, because I heard last week that people believe one of the reasons that they didn't start that flight is because they were fearful of strikes coming. Have you heard that? I have not heard that, but
the whole reason they're doing that whole leg is because of all the movies and TV shows that shoot here, and they were fearful of starting that leg and the strikes happening, and they're just like got empty airplanes. I don't know if it's true or not.
Well, that makes sense. That's been one of the big things that the Film Commission here in Savannah has been really fighting for, is that direct flight.
Oh, it sucked. I mean, let me tell you, I go to LA fairly regularly, and I'm sure you guys do too. And it literally is an all-day affair. Last time I flew back from LA a couple months ago, I got, the plane was running late. I got into Miami late, missed my connecting flight from Miami to Savannah. I got stuck. I mean, it was just a nightmare. So it's like basically usually, 10, 12, 14 hours making it from here to LA. Such a pain. Direct flight, even if it was like a shitty airline like Breeze, I would use it all the time. You know what I mean?
Next up, a word from our sponsor, Breeze.
It sucks, but it gets you there.
Exactly. But
that's their slogan.
So,
yeah.
But the fact of the
guys,
matter,
y'all have a good one. Let's all grab a drink or something sometime when you're free.
That would be great. Thank you, man.
All right, guys. All right, I'll talk to y'all soon.
All right, we appreciate it.
Okay, bye.
Bye. So, like we were saying, right? I mean, this really is difficult on not just the writers, not just the actors, but, every single aspect of the industry, including entertainment lawyers. Everyone is being impacted, but what I have been heartened by is the fact that almost universally, I think that everyone recognizes that this is a turning point. I mean, it really is a time to just draw a line in the sand for not just for actors and writers, but the whole entertainment industry.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, it's crucial for all of us, especially those in the industry, to understand all those factors that are in play. But remember, we're not just here to keep you updated. We're here to help you navigate these issues and make sure you know your rights and what you're entitled to.
That's right. And on that note, we will be back in 2 weeks with more updates on the world of entertainment law. And until then, I'm Bo.
And I'm Ryan. And that's been Allegedly with Bowen and Ryan. Catch us next time.